Hi, this is Joe from PrepAgent. What is specific performance? A real estate purchase agreement is a binding contract. The parties are obligated to take the agreed upon actions specified by the terms and conditions of the contract. But if either party fails to perform their part of the contract for any reason not permitted by the contract terms, the other party can obtain certain kinds of relief, essentially payback for the other party not following through. Legally, these are called remedies. There are two primary types of relief that the courts will award: monetary damages and specific performance. Monetary damages. Monetary damages are the most common type of legal remedy when dealing with home purchases. If a seller backed out of a purchase agreement, the buyer could sue for monetary damages. The buyer would seek compensation for all the costs they have paid, including a return of their earnest money deposit, and often ask for additional compensation for missed time and opportunities. Specific performance. Specific performance is a court order that requires a party to perform a specific action, usually one stated in the original contract. It is considered an equitable remedy, and it is used when monetary damages would not satisfy the party seeking relief. Specific performance is not often used by the courts in many states, and though it is rarely used, one area where it is traditionally applied is in real estate transactions. In extreme cases, it could even lead to someone being forced to sell their home against their wishes. Courts acknowledge that sometimes when a person's objective was to buy or sell a specific property, monetary damages are not enough to satisfy the breach of contract. This is because, unlike most other types of goods, real estate is fundamentally unique. No two homes or pieces of land are exactly alike, so it can be difficult for money to approximate the loss a buyer faces when a seller backs out of a contract. If specific performance is sought as a remedy, it's unlikely that monetary damages will also be awarded. While each state's laws are different, usually it's one or the other. For specific performance to be available as a remedy, several elements must be present. These include contract, damages inadequate, mutuality of obligations, and judge's discretion. Contract. For a court to order specific performance, there must be a valid and enforceable binding contract. Damages inadequate. Specific performance is only ordered when monetary damages are inadequate to compensate the injured party. Mutuality of obligation. There must also be a mutuality of obligation, meaning that both parties have undertaken duties towards each other as part of the contract. Judge's discretion. When creating a real estate sales contract, the parties can freely include specific performance as a remedy. But if this provision is not included in the contract, the potential for specific performance is left to the judge's discretion. It will be up to the court to determine if specific performance is the best remedy after one party shows a breach of contract. Usually the court will require the plaintiff or the party benefiting from the judge's ruling to show that they substantially performed their part of the contract and that they are capable of continuing to perform their contractual obligations. Buyer's use of specific performance. A buyer may pursue specific performance when a seller is unwilling to carry out their obligations under the contract. If the court orders specific performance, it requires the seller to complete performance of the contract and convey the property to the buyer. A buyer can also be awarded specific performance when the seller cannot convey all of the property covered in the contract. This could happen when the buyer agrees to purchase a larger parcel of land than the seller actually owns, or when additional defects in title are uncovered. The seller may be compelled to perform on the contract as much as possible, with a reduction of the purchase price to compensate for the defect or deficiency. Once a lawsuit is underway, the real estate buyer can also file a legal document known as a notice of pendency. This notice, also called a lease pendens, effectively prevents any transfer of property to a third party until the claim has been resolved. The seller will be unable to sell the property to another buyer while the lawsuit is going on. To obtain specific performance, a buyer must show that they were ready and able to perform at the closing. Most importantly, the buyer must show that they had access to financing either in the form of cash or from a lending institution. Seller's use of specific performance. If a buyer decides they do not want to go through with the sale, a seller may also sue for specific performance of the sales contract. The theory is that an evenness or symmetry should be upheld between the remedies available to both buyer and sellers. But not all states permit this. First, the seller would need to look closely at the purchase contract to see what it says about a buyer's breach. If a contract provides a specific exclusive remedy in the event of the buyer's breach, the seller is prevented from suing for the full purchase price. In some states, the buyer's deposit is considered earnest money and it is meant to serve as liquidated damages in the event of a breach. In those cases, a court will not order specific performance. For a seller to request specific performance, all conditions of the contract applying to the seller must have been performed. The seller must be ready, willing, and able to comply with the contract, being prepared to sell the property and convey marketable title on the property to the buyer. If the seller is not completely followed through on their end, they cannot seek specific performance. Finally, it should be noted that real estate brokers cannot sue for specific performance. If there is a breach of contract that negatively impacts them, a broker would sue for monetary damages. This is Joe from PrepAgent reminding you to keep it concise and keep it simple.